The glass didn't fall, it leapt, like it wanted to be the first to leave the room. The stem snapped in Briar's hand, as if obeying a cue, champagne arcing in a glittering parabola that caught the club lights and turned the whole lie into confetti. "I'm pregnant," she said, cool as a winter mirror, "and I want a divorce." She was holding Cade's fingers like a ribbon she'd won at the fair. The DJ didn't cut the music. The city didn't dim. People kept laughing the way people laugh when they think disaster is a rumor. I noticed everything that didn't matter. The blue vein in Briar's wrist, the smudge of navy eyeliner she'd pretended not to care about fixing, Cade's watch ticking too eagerly, as if he could count my ruin in seconds. I'd spent months meeting Briar's appetites with a calendar and a credit card, smoothing the edges of a marriage that had learned to demand applause. Now, with one sentence and a borrowed grin, she made my devotion look like a hobby. "Say it again," I told her, because sometimes you need a second shot to believe you've been shot. Briar obliged. She always did love an encore. "I want a divorce, Jett." She tilted her head, the move that once made me feel chosen. "You'll be fine, you'll rebuild. You always do." Cade didn't smirk. He smoldered, the curated expression of a man who had never paid retail for consequences. "Let's be adults," he offered, voice dipped in excuse. Being an adult meant not wrapping my hand in his lapel and subtracting his teeth. It meant subtracting him another way. "You work for Helliant," I said, "and Helliant's Miami contracts run through my firm." To Briar. "You knew that." Her eyes flickered, not remorse, calculation. The music hit a bass drop. Someone at the next table cheered like the ocean had arrived. I placed my ring on the table beside the broken stem, like a coin on a dead man's eyes. "Keep it," I told her. "It suits your lighting." I didn't hit him, I left. On the sidewalk, heat rose from the pavement in invisible ladders, and I climbed each rung like air was the only thing I had left to own. By the time I reached the curb, my phone was vibrating so hard it felt alive. The screen lit with names that used to mean safety. I ignored them all until I saw one, Knox. "Tell me you're not about to make a mistake," Knox said. He'd been my brother before there was language for brotherhood. "I already made it," I said, and watched a couple blur past, laughing like their throats didn't have to hold anything heavy. "Now I'm making a plan." The plan wasn't elegant, it was cold. I called Mara, my attorney, the one who treated law like sculpture, cut away everything that didn't belong. "File tonight," I said. "Prelim filings, asset protections, discovery requests. He works at Helliant. I want a firewall so bright it tans him." "You finally ready to stop negotiating with ghosts?" she asked. "I'm ready to evict them." By dawn, our house looked like a case study in absence. I moved through rooms like a careful thief reclaiming a life. The velvet chairs she'd insisted on because the camera loved them. The shelf of curated poetry she never opened past page 3. The mirror where she practiced sincerity until it fit. On the bed, an old sweatshirt of mine lay folded, soft with the kind of memory clothing collects in the dark. I didn't take it. I didn't want a fabric that remembered me softer. I drove east until the sunrise bullied the horizon into gold, then kept driving until the city thinned into marsh and water. My father's boat, Lumen, waited in a marina where men said little and meant it. Lumen smelled like diesel and rope and old storms. I untied her like I was untying my own throat. Out past the channel markers, the world went wide enough to hold a scream. I didn't scream. I let the wind do the work. Grief on water isn't the same as grief on land. On water, it has nowhere to sit, so it moves through you like a tide, scouring what it can't keep. The bay was a plate of hammered silver. Pelicans arrowed low, smug with their indifference. I cut the engine near the Spoil Islands and lay back, the sky a bright wound. Sleep came like a cheap blessing. I woke with a sunburn and a clarity that felt like theft. I made 3 calls. Mara to lock down the accounts and file an injunction preventing the sale of any marital asset without written consent. Milo, my CTO, to audit every Helliant integration with our architecture and prepare an exit plan with penalties so heavy they'd leave a crater. And my mother to tell her I was okay. I lied like a good son. Then I went home to pack for real. I took what I'd brought into the marriage, a box of books with dog-eared pages where the sentences felt like knives that loved me. A framed photo of my father on Lumen, jaw stubborn, eyes kind. A shoebox with notes from Knox passed in algebra about God and girls and boats. A ceramic mug crooked with my mother's fingerprints from the year she took a pottery class and learned humility. When the doorbell rang, it wasn't Briar. It was Cade. When a man like Cade shows up at your door, he is counting on context to protect him. He thinks aura is armor. "We should talk," he said, sunglasses perched in the collar of his shirt like a dare. "You're trespassing," I said, "which means you don't actually want to talk. You think you can make this ugly for me." His eyes were bright with the kind of arrogance that makes gravity consider doing something special. We both know you like things clean. I like things honest, I said. Clean is what liars call the absence of witnesses. He took a step forward, misreading my stillness for invitation. Briar deserves a man who knows how to move on. She does, I said, and closed the door slow enough that he could see his reflection flatten in the glass. Then I leaned my forehead against the wood and laughed, not because any of this was funny, but because sometimes the body throws a rope to the mind and calls it a joke. That night, Lumen rocked at the dock like a patient animal. I slept on the boat, the cabin a box with corners that knew my bones. At 3 a.m., thunder tried to teach the city fear. I let it. The storm broke open and washed everything that would wash. Some things I knew, stained by design. In the morning, Knox climbed on board with coffee that tasted like penance and a bag of breakfast sandwiches that tasted like home. He didn't hug me, he didn't say sorry. He sat until my breath synced with the water. Tell me the version that doesn't make you the hero, he said. I stayed too long, I said. I loved the performance. I mistook applause for oxygen. I kept trying to fix the script instead of leaving the stage. Good, he said, start there. Mara's office looked like a place where decisions went to get sharpened. Sunlight carved white lines across a table heavy enough to anchor ships. She walked me through filings and contingencies with a calm that felt like scaffolding. Her counsel will play the pregnancy card, she said. We respond with math, not morality. We honor the child without funding your extinction. She wanted pain to look like art, I said. I want accountability to look like weather inevitable. Mara approved, we'll keep your company insulated. As for Helliant, they'll try to retaliate, we'll make it expensive. She slid a folder across the table. Also, your prenup is stronger than your heartbreak. Outside, Miami was a bright lie stitched together by salt and steel. I went to the marina because rope and diesel do not lie. Lumen needed work, new fuel lines, a temperamental impeller, a deck that wanted sanding. Fixing what I could fix felt like prayer. The first scrape of sandpaper against teak sounded like forgiveness refusing to be metaphor. On the third day of doing the same honest thing until it turned into a different honest thing, I met Rowan. She arrived with a mutt named Atlas and a smile that looked like it knew how to choose its battles. Her hair was braided like a plan. She wore scrubs under a faded bomber jacket, and there was clay on her left forearm, as if she had tried to make something earlier and ran out of time. Atlas swallowed a fishhook, she said, holding the dog like a piece of bad news. He hates the vet who helped last time. He likes boats. He likes you. I'm Jett, I said. And I am not a vet. You are a man with steady hands, she said, eyes scanning my deck. And a clean first aid kit, please. Knox, who pretends to be a cynic, gestured them aboard. Atlas panted, trusting idiots and angels alike. I cut the hook free with a pair of flush cutters, while Rowan held Atlas and murmured nonsense in a voice that made time feel like a rumor. When it was over, the dog shook himself violently and immediately forgave gravity. You have a way with creatures who can't explain their pain, she said. So do you, I said. We drank terrible coffee from my galley as the sky rehearsed rain and decided against it. Rowan told me she ran a small animal clinic with a leaky roof, a loyal staff, and a collection of strays who had decided work was optional. She kept her grief folded small in the pocket of her voice, but it was there, a crisp square you could see if you knew where to look. Who broke you? She asked, gentle as gauze. An idea, I said, of love that needs you to disappear so it can shine. Rowan nodded. I lost my mother last winter. Grief made me fluent in things I didn't want to say. Turns out, honesty makes fewer mistakes. She left with Atlas trotting like he had always understood redemption was a leash you loosen slowly. After she was gone, the boat felt like someone had thrown the windows open. Mara called with an update. Helliant is rattling their sabers. They want out of contracts without penalties. They can have out, I said, not without gravity. Also, she added, Briar's council wants temporary support. Math, I said, not moralities. We sent spreadsheets that didn't apologize. We proposed a trust for the child that did not include underwriting Cade's next watch. And then the city did what cities do. It tried to take my story and sell it in pieces. Blogs posted blurry photos of me sanding a deck like I was auditioning for contrition. People I hadn't seen since high school texted to say they always knew Briar was too much art, not enough heart, as if misogyny were a form of loyalty. I blocked and breathed. Nights on Lumen got quieter. Storms still practiced their scales over the bay, but inside the cabin, there were stretches of calm so clean it made my teeth ache. I dreamed in knots, clove hitches of memory, bolins of desire, square knots of habit tying me to a version of myself I was no longer renewing. In the morning, I untied what the night had arranged. Rowan started stopping by with Atlas or a Tupperware of food that tasted like someone's aunt loved me. She asked questions like a person who values answers more than ammunition. "What did you love about her?" she asked once, not accusing. "She made a room brighter on command," I said. "I mistook that for sunlight. And now, I'm learning to prefer dawn to switches." We did not turn into a romance montage. We turned into two people who knew how to find the center of a thing without cheapening the edges. She talked about her clinic. I told her about my father teaching me to navigate by stars that weren't always visible, but were always there. She laughed at my jokes without rehearsing. I learned where the bones of her silence were buried. Then Briar's mother showed up at my door with a face that had learned defeat like an alphabet. "Please," she said before I could decide which version of myself to be. "Briar's not well." I let Helen in because even rage knows the taste of respect. She perched on the edge of a chair like she didn't want to make a dent. "She's not eating, she's not sleeping. She says she can hear the mirror talking," Helen said, twisting her wedding band the way people do when the past tries to change the subject. She made a terrible mistake. She keeps doubling down because she thinks grace is a game you can win if you stay on the field long enough. "What do you want from me?" "Nothing you can afford," Helen said. "Just don't make a monster out of my daughter. It will make you small." When she left, I stood in the doorway and counted my breaths until the number meant something. Then I called Mara. "Set the trust. Make it generous enough to embarrass me and structured enough to protect me," I said. "You sure?" "I don't want to parent through a judge," I said. "I want to sleep through a storm." Mara did the math. I did the work. Rowan brought me a basil plant that tried valiantly to live on a windowsill that loved dramatic exits. Atlas learned to sit on command and to ignore pelicans, though he reserved the right to judge them. Lumen's teak went from gray to honey under my hands, proof that attention is another word for resurrection. Late one Friday, as the sun rehearsed its best version of leaving, I found the lock on Lumen's cabin sliced clean. Nothing missing, nothing trashed. Just the quiet insult of intrusion, the way a stranger's perfume lingers in a room and makes it look like it was always a little dishonest. I installed cameras with Knox, his jokes cheap, his concern expensive. The bay kept breathing. So did I. Helliant blinked first. They sent a settlement proposal wrapped in lawyerly velvet. "Terminate contracts, waive penalties, whisper confidentiality." We replied with math and weather. They settled. Cade's watch kept time for other men. Briar's counsel called to bargain in the currency of pity. "She's fragile," the attorney said, as if fragility were a virtue that demanded rent. "So am I," I said. "I'm just quieter about it." We finalized the trust. It was a bridge for a child who didn't ask to be born into theater. It was a moat around my sanity. The papers took ink. The joint statement read like amends wrote itself in passive voice. People online fought about strangers they couldn't pick out of a grocery line. I took Lumen out to the edge of the inlet at dawn and watched pelicans practice their dives with religious commitment. Rowan and I grew around each other the way roots and pipes negotiate, carefully with respect for pressure and potential collapse. She kept her clinic open late for a turtle with a fishing line through its beak and called me to hold the light. I attended 2 AA meetings with Knox to make sure he remembered his life loves him more than the drink does. We took Atlas to the sandbar and taught him that joy and obedience can be neighbors. One afternoon, as the heat pushed the air flat and the bay went still as if waiting for a cue, Briar stood at the end of my dock holding a baby in a sling and a sickness in her eyes. She was thinner, her strength redistributed into stubborn angles. She did not look like a villain. She looked like a person who had lost the map and mistaken a cliff for a road. "Jett," she said, in a voice that remembered how to be small. "I need help." I had built my days to avoid this scene, and here it was, inevitable as tide. "Say his name," I said, because the right nouns can build a bridge where apologies fail. "August," she whispered, and the baby, as if cued, fussed the way newborns do when they are certain of their needs and rude about their timing. "What do you need?" "A doctor who sees us as human," she said. "A place to sit for an hour without performing competence. A number that isn't a bill." It would be cleaner to say I hesitated. I didn't. "Get in," I told her, pointing at Lumen. I texted Rowan, newborn possible ear infection. "Mom dehydrated. Are you at the clinic?" Rowan replied, "Always bring them." At the clinic, Rowan moved like a sentence that knew where it was going. She took August with practiced tenderness, checked his fever, his ears, his throat, his belly, his breath. She checked Briar too, with the kind of eye that makes lying uncomfortable. "You need water, salt, and sleep," she said softly. "You think you need atonement. That can wait its turn." Briar cried so quietly, it hurt louder than a scream. She apologized to the exam table for existing. She apologized to August for not knowing enough. She apologized to me for the rooftop without looking up. I wanted power, she said to her knees. I confused it with escape. Power doesn't save you, Rowan said, wiping the tiny curve of August's ear. Kindness does, mostly from yourself. Back on the dock, Briar tried to hand me a crumpled 50 like the universe was a parking attendant, and she wanted to pretend she wasn't broke. I closed her fingers around the bill. August deserves oxygen, I said. That's not charity, that's infrastructure. You're a better man than me, she said, meaning it in the broken way people do when they are trying not to drown on your shoes. No, I said, I'm just a man building a life I can survive in. We didn't become friends. We became citizens of the same weather system, occasionally exchanging forecasts with minimal commentary. Briar began therapy that wasn't about keeping the mirror company. She sent a photo of August sleeping with one fist next to his face like a boxer who had just learned peace. I didn't show it to anyone. Some mercies are private property. 2 nights later, the camera on Lumen pinged my phone at 2:13 a.m. A figure moved on the deck with the confidence of a person who believes the world is their foyer. Not Cade, shorter, jittery. I was across the dock with Knox in under 60 seconds, baseball bat in his hand, a flashlight in mine, my heart performing percussion it had learned at birth. Who's there? I asked, because we still pretend ritual changes outcomes. The man froze, then ran. We chased not like heroes, like idiots. He slipped on algae-slick plank and went down in a graceless sprawl. Up close, he was all bones and adrenaline. They told me you'd have cash, he spat, fear turning his mouth mean. They told me to send a message. Who's they? Knox asked, voice dangerous with mercy. The man swallowed names with a visible effort, then coughed up one. Roth, not Helliant, a contractor they used when they wanted to launder risk. I called Mara. She called a judge. By sunrise, we had a restraining order, a police report, and a marina full of opinions. Do you want out? Rowan asked, standing on the dock like a harbor. I want through, I said. Out is a circle, through is a line. We tightened our circles. Knox moved his truck to the lot by my slip. The sheriff parked heavy near the bait shack. Roth learned the difference between rumor and documentation the way men like him always do, publicly, expensively. When the adrenaline washed out, fatigue came to collect. I slept for 11 hours and dreamed of a house with all the doors open and no wind. In the morning, the sky put on a fresh shirt and the bay pretended nothing had happened. Pretend can be helpful when you know what's underneath it. A year is a long time until it isn't. Papers turn into precedent. Scandals find new faces. Boats age, even when loved. People do too. I learned the choreography of a life that didn't apologize for needing repairs. Some mornings, grief still knocked just to keep its keys. I let it in, fed it toast, and sent it on its way. Rowan and I did not announce ourselves to fate. We showed up. Sunday mornings at the market, where tomatoes taught me restraint. Tuesday nights on the dock with takeout that sweated through its paper and stories that didn't. Thursdays fixing the clinic's leaky roof, while Atlas supervised from a milk crate like a manager with a heart. We kissed when rain made the world small. We argued about nothing the week we both forgot how to ask for help, then apologized like people who know the difference between pride and self-respect. Once we walked into a gallery by accident and found Briar's new series on the far wall, paintings that looked like weather maps of bad decisions learning to name themselves. She saw us and didn't look away. We didn't either. August, sturdier now, fierce with curiosity, reached for Rowan's braid and laughed when she let him tug. The sound was small and enormous at once. Cade was not there. His name had begun to show up in the business pages under headings like restructure and inquiry. People who once borrowed his aura were returning it without cleaning it first. The world is slow, but it isn't stupid forever. Mara sent me a single line on my divorce anniversary. Proud of the life you negotiated. Knox sent a photo of a fishing lure he'd found that looked like it had survived a war. My mother invited us to dinner and overseasoned nothing. We ate and she told Rowan stories about my father that made the air softer. On a Sunday so gentle it should have been illegal, we took Lumen out past the causeway, where the water runs a clearer kind of blue, and the city looks like it left its makeup at home. The wind was lazy, the sun was generous. Atlas stood at the bow like he believed in poetry. Rowan leaned against the cabin, eyes closed, mouth curved like certainty. This feels like borrowed time, I said. All time is borrowed, she said. We just decide what interest looks like. I cut the engine and let the bay hold us. I thought about the rooftop and the glass that had leapt. I thought about Lumen's sliced lock, and Atlas's saved throat and August's stubborn fist. I thought about the version of me who believed love required vanishing, and the version of me who knew better and still forgot sometimes. Marry me, I said, not because I needed a ceremony to validate healing, but because I wanted to build a structure love could live in without eating us alive. Rowan opened her eyes and smiled like she'd been waiting for the world to catch up to her bones. Yes, she said, with caveats. Name them. We don't perform, we don't fund mirrors. We fight fair. We leave rooms before we burn them. We forgive on a delay long enough to tell the truth first. Done, I said, meaning it so hard it felt like a muscle I hadn't used in years waking up. We married at the marina on a day the weather chose to bless. Helen came, face softer, grief reknit into something like wisdom. Briar came with August, who pointed at pelicans and declared them all by the same name, which felt like theology. Mara wore a suit that could sue God and win. Knox cried the way men do when they think their bodies will explode if they let sound out. My mother kissed Rowan's forehead as if to mark her as ours. The vows were not poetry. They were maintenance instructions. We promised to oil hinges, to check pressure, to replace lines before they failed, to name leaks without shame, to keep an inventory of the good. When we kissed, the gulls pretended disinterest and then applauded anyway. The bay approved, which matters to me more than it should. Later, when the sun got drunk on its own exit and the dock lights clicked on one by one like a timeline we didn't know, I took Lumen out with Rowan beside me and the people who had refused to let me vanish waving like buoys. The channel welcomed us the way a road welcomes a car that knows where it's going. We anchored near the Spoil Islands again. The wind wrote our names on the water and edited them kindly. Rowan rested her head on my shoulder and pointed at a satellite scraping the dark. Look, she said, even the machines want to be stars. I thought about forgiveness and how I had been chasing it like a finish line when it had always been a practice, like tying a knot or sanding a deck, repetitive, patient, more muscle than magic. I thought about love as a line, not a circle, forward, through, toward. Back at the dock, a kid waited with a knot in his hands and a question on his face. Can you teach me? He asked, and I crouched and told him about the rabbit and the tree, about the hole and the return, about how a good knot holds without choking. He tried, failed, tried again. When he got it, he lit up like a small lighthouse that knew its job. Rowan and I walked home along the water, Atlas zigzagging like an argument you're glad you had. Happy? She asked. Working on it, I said, every day. Good, she said, me too. That night, after we'd folded the day into a drawer it deserved, I lay awake listening to the fan slice the dark into manageable pieces. The room smelled like basil finally winning and salt finally resting. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Thank you, it read. No signature, no follow-up. I didn't need one. I turned to Rowan and whispered the only vow that matters when the lights are off and the world goes honest. I will not love in a way that requires either of us to disappear. The fan kept turning. The bay kept breathing. The glass, wherever it had landed a lifetime ago, glittered in some forgotten gutter under some indifferent moon, and I blessed it for jumping first. Some indifferent moon, and I blessed it for jumping first.